The kids are still at practice, and I have no idea what's for dinner.
You can get a rotisserie chicken and 2 sides for just $15 in as fast as an hour with Walmart Express Delivery.
Who said that? Who's in my house? Don't play with me, because I'm not the one.
It's just your friendly Walmart announcer. This is a commercial.
Oh, okay. You were saying dinner for a family was just $15?
Yep, it'll be at your door by the time you get the kids home from practice. Order now. Welcome to your Walmart. Subject to availability, restrictions, and fees apply.
Now that was a helpful commercial.
Springfest and Ego Days are here at Lowe's. Right now, get a free Select Ego 56-volt battery with purchase of a Select trimmer, blower, or mower kit. Plus, shop today for new and exclusive items you need for your lawn. So get ready for spring with the latest in innovation from Ego, the #1 rated brand in cordless outdoor power. Only at Lowe's. We help, you save. Offer valid through 4/2. Selection varies by location while supplies last.
It is Monday, March 31st, 2025. I hope your baseball team was better than mine over this opening weekend of the season. Welcome back to Hang Up and Listen, the sports podcast here at Slate. Back with you again, I'm Alex Kirshner. I'm a contributing writer for Slate, and I also co-host the college football podcast Split Zone Duo. First up this week, we will talk about the sports world's major geopolitical deal that was promised an awfully long time ago, but still hasn't materialized. That's the one between the PGA Tour and the Saudi Arabian government influence project LIV Golf. We will also talk about college basketball, naturally, and go over some interesting odds and ends as those tournaments head towards their conclusions. And we will check in with Alex Ovechkin's increasingly close chase to set the all-time goal-scoring record in the National Hockey League. As usual, joining me this week is Lindsay Gibbs, the publisher of Power Plays, a newsletter that covers the biggest stories of the day in women's sports. Lindsay, hello.
Hello, everyone. I got to say, I'm getting some really good pitches for my favorite MLB team. Ooh. No pun intended. Ooh. And I haven't made a decision yet. It's March Madness. I'm not making any major life decisions during March Madness.
Who's the leader in the literal clubhouse?
Well, the Twins are in contention, but I also got Ryan DeBusk, a listener. I hope I'm saying that right, Ryan, sent me a very, very strong case to return to my longtime love of the Padres. So yes. He made a strong case, memes included. I love a meme.
Yeah, you have such a long relationship with them. Why stray now?
Ben Lindbergh, you are here as well. You are senior editor for The Ringer. You co-host Effectively Wild, a baseball podcast. Have you done anything to the barrel of your bats this weekend?
No, I have not. I'm still using the standard bats because, like Aaron Judge, I say, why mess with success? Everything seems to be going well for me, except for the fact that I have a cold. It is warm where I am, but I have a cold. I'd rather it be cold and I not have one, but I will soldier on nonetheless.
A tremendous guest joins us in just moments. You're about to meet him. But before we get into our business, as always, we want to thank our Slate Plus members for making this show possible. Subscribing helps us make the show, of course. It also allows you to get the show ad-free, which is a great perk, and you get bonus segments too. There's good news. We have one of those bonus segments live right now for Slate Plus members. It is about players faking injuries, going out of their way in an unflattering way to draw foul contact in basketball, in different sports leagues all across the spectrum, trying very hard to stop this fakery. You can hear that episode right now as long as you are a Slate Plus member. Subscribe by going to Apple Podcasts and clicking Try Free at the top of our show page. Or you can visit slate.com/hangupplus to get access wherever you listen. June 6, 2023. That was the day that the PGA Tour's commissioner, Jay Monahan, sat grinning on a CNBC set next to Yasser Al-Rumayyan, the head of the Saudi Public Investment Fund. They were there to announce a genuinely shocking deal that would severely cool and probably outright end, a lot of us thought, a business war between the PGA Tour and LIV Golf, the very well-funded Saudi-backed alternative that had poached a big handful of the tour's best players, as well as some big names that weren't great players anymore, and put them into LIV's differently formatted 54-hole no-cut golf tournaments all around the world. The thing was, the deal that they were announcing that day wasn't exactly a deal. It was a, quote, framework agreement, the sides called it. And at the time, I think most people in the golf industry thought the T's would be crossed soon enough. But it's been almost 2 years. The Masters is about to come around again. I think most people in the golf industry now are shocked that this deal has not actually closed and have come to a sort of get off the pot stature about this thing. PGA Tour players have often indicated that a deal was close, including Tiger Woods as recently as February when he was on set with the CBS crew at his own tournament and made it sound like there might be a pact coming more or less imminently, if you read between the lines of what he was saying. Still hasn't happened, and despite a whole lot of optimistic statements from Woods and others, we're all waiting. Let's talk with someone who has covered this saga closer than just about anyone. Joel Beall is a senior writer at Golf Digest, and he is the author of Playing Dirty, a book coming out in June that delves deep into the PGA Tour LIV backstory, and also features, I should note, some really nice meditations on how fun golf can be when it is not about the various parties involved in this negotiation. You can pre-order it now. We'll link it in our show notes. Joel joins us now, and thank you, Joel, for being here. Can I just ask to start, what is the holdup?
Yeah, so on the surface level, the holdup is the PGA Tour doesn't want to integrate team events into its schedule, but that's extreme oversimplification. So just for background, there was this idea that from both tour officials, government officials, and those that study antitrust law, that for a potential deal for the tour and Saudi Arabia's PIF, which is the financial backer of LIV Golf, basically to get through these antitrust regulations, some semblance of LIV Golf would need to continue in this theoretical new landscape. But when President Trump won the election this November, we started to hear rumblings that the tour was so confident Trump would push whatever agreement through his Department of Justice that maybe, at least from the tour side, could this new entity essentially remain just one tour. You mentioned that Tiger was speaking confidently at his event. That same week, early in the week, Commissioner Jay Monahan met with a few of us and talked about his hope for everyone playing on one unified tour. That might not sound like much, but Monahan has kept things very close to the vest throughout the past 4 years. So to see him be so optimistic about this deal and that it would be only one league really told us that the tour thinks they're going to get this through on their terms. So this White House meeting goes down, and just for background, we started to hear from both sides earlier in the day that a deal would be announced later that afternoon. And then that White House meeting happens, and it does not go well. We've heard multiple people say, PIF Governor Yasser Al-Rahman essentially went silent over the last hour of the meeting because he felt so disrespected. And I get there can be hesitation on deals like this when they get really close to finish, but I don't think this is just hesitation getting close to the goal line. I think the longer this goes, the more we hear. It sounds like the deals have gone cold to the point where players and officials on both sides are asserting, hey, we don't really need a deal now. So yeah, as close as it looked like to happening, it feels like we're really, really far away now.
So this meeting was the one in February with Yasser, with Jay Monahan, with Tiger Woods showing up, who's one of Donald Trump's best friends and is now dating his ex-daughter-in-law. And after that meeting, the PGA Tour side gave the most optimistic statement ever. I mean, talking about how this was so productive, thanks to President Trump's leadership, we're so close to reunifying golf. You're telling me more or less that is bullshit.
Essentially. And again, I think at the time, at that meeting, I think there still was belief of, listen, this is Al-Rahman's baby, right? I mean, this is something that has brought him access to the top players in the world, access to a lot of government leaders. Once this deal happens, at least in the current iteration, we've been told that they're mapping out, he kind of becomes a non-factor in all this. So I do understand why he's being very protective on this, but it sounds like as we're getting farther apart from this White House deal, both sides are now entrenching into what they believe they want. I don't think Al-Rahman is going to budge on the team aspect. I think the tour now is also wondering, what exactly is LIV bringing to the table? Because the tour feels like they have bended on a lot, and they essentially feel like PIF hasn't. So, in that sense, as the further we go away, I don't think we have a deal coming anytime soon. But I think at the meeting, there was still hope that this thing was close to being done. But yeah, at this point, as we about to turn to April, it sure feels like we're extremely far away from anything coming to fruition.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could take us back a little bit. I mean, I was one of the many who followed this story really closely when LIV Golf first came onto the scene and there was all the controversy. But I'll admit I haven't paid that close of attention to LIV Golf since. It's kind of in the background. I don't know when its events are. I don't seek it out to watch. It doesn't come across my general sports media landscape diet. My impression is, and from the little research I've done, that it's not getting great ratings, but that it's still, paying the players and, maybe shows no signs of financially going under because we know they have a lot of money. But has it made, is it showing any signs of growth into anything that would be a self-sustaining league, or
so good question.
Is it in trouble?
This is part of the holdup, right? Because on the PGA Tour side, their brain trust believe LIV has already fulfilled its fundamental purpose for Saudi Arabia as a soft power exercise, right? I think you hit it. If you look at this strictly as a sports entity, it's failed to gain traction with the golf populace. But if you kind of really look at what this really is, which is a way to foster diplomatic relations, that point it's been successful, right? Because of LIV Golf, Saudi Arabia essentially has direct access to the White House. Now that this channel is established, and this is at least from the tour side, believes what incentive exists for PIF, which you're right, they have a lot of money, but they're also operating under this new cost-cutting mandate. Why would they continue to hemorrhage money on a league no one is watching? The tour also has this idea that, look, Jon Rahm was the one elite talent to defect to LIV since LIV's inception. When LIV started in 2022, you had a wave of players go. That next year, no one really went. Rahm went in 2024, but this past year, no one left either. So basically, one big guy has left in the past 3 years. And besides Rahm, the only other two people that the tour really wants back under their umbrella are Bryson DeChambeau, who went from this very divisive figure on the tour to now one of the more commercial appealing players out there, along with Brooks Koepka, who, the guy's just an absolute force when it comes to major championships. So the tour is going, why, if we could just extract one of these three guys in Rahm, DeChambeau, Koepka, and these contracts for these guys are starting to come up here either this year or next year, is this the time to call LIV's bluff?
How does the money compare, right? What are Rahm and Bryson and these guys earning compared to kind of what their counterparts are earning on the PGA? Is it still that much of a difference?
Oh yeah, it's for the deals have never been publicly released. It's believed Bryson was given a 4 to 5 year deal for $125 to $150 million. Brooks Koepka in the same range. Jon Rahm's been all over the map. We've heard 600 million. We've heard 300 million. I think it's closer to the 300 million, but that's still a lot of money to play 14, 15 times a year of golf. For contrast, Scottie Scheffler had one of the best years in golf history last year, and certainly the most profitable. Basically made anywhere from 30 to 60 million if you count bonus attractions in. Guys who are like fifth and sixth were making somewhere between 6 and 7 million. So it really is a generational gap. And also for context, Tiger Woods is the leading money winner in PGA Tour history with over $100 million. And that was over essentially a 25, 30-year career. His adversary, Phil Mickelson, basically got that at 51 years old for a 4-year deal. So and the fact that these are guaranteed too in a sport where you only really make what you earn. This is the one of the few sports that doesn't have guaranteed contracts. You basically just went off your purse. Really made the money being thrown around substantial, and that's why they were able to extract. They being LIV. 20 of the top 100 players when this thing started in 2022.
But just a quick thing, what about the average LIV golfer? The one that I don't know.
So the average player might not even have a guaranteed deal, at least in terms of, money, but they're playing in these events that still have extremely high purses. The winner will win $4 million. Last place still cashes a check for $100,000. So you could essentially finish last in every LIV event and still make $1-2 million for the year, which isn't bad work.
No.
Joel, one of the things that I'm curious about is the team golf element that you mentioned as a particular sticking point. One of the things that we know about Yasser Al-Rumayyan of the Public Investment Fund is that, well, in addition to being the head of this financial arm that works for the guy who chops up dissidents and does all of the things that the leader of Saudi Arabia does, he's also just a golf nut. It almost feels ridiculous to say it, but this dude is just a golf sicko. He loves golf. I get it. I love it too, even though I have a different line of work than he does. It seems like he is just really obsessed with team golf being a part of golf's future and him being credited or LIV being credited with kind of taking the Ryder Cup-y format of golf and making it a mainstream tour thing. Is that right? Is it that simple?
Not necessarily that simple, because really the team element wasn't his idea. You have to go back. LIV essentially stole their format from a different entity, I think called the Premier Golf League. Back when Premier Golf League was trying to get investment, PIF was involved. And finally, PIF kind of realized, wait a minute, if we're funding this, why don't we just do this on our own? Why he's been so hard on this team element has not really been sold, but I think you are onto something where he feels like if LIV does dissolve in the PGA Tour, at least this will be his lasting legacy. But yeah, this thing, it's not just about this Golf Saudi endeavor. It's just not about professional golf. He envisions golf as a way to, as we mentioned, foster diplomatic relations. He imagines Saudi Arabia having this national team to compete in the Olympics and other team events. He looks at Saudi Arabia as a potential destination. They've started to build golf courses in the country. So the guy really is a golf fan, but yeah, why he's essentially held up on this team element when we've really seen, aside from the Ryder Cup, which is played every 2 years, a team element really doesn't work in this sport. But because he's seen success on the F1 forum, Al Rahman's also the head of Newcastle, Premier League in Europe. He thinks there's a team future in this, and just as we've seen with the lack of traction from LIV, golf fans don't seem to be interested. Right? If there's that provincial tie with the Ryder Cup and maybe to a degree with the President's Cup, maybe, but otherwise, golf fans just can't get behind the team aspect.
Joel, your book's title is Rediscovering Golf's Soul in Scotland in an Age of Sports Washing and Civil War. Usually when there is a civil war, the victorious side, if there is one, has to decide whether to exact retribution or encourage reunification, a la Lincoln's 10% plan, where he planned to offer full pardons to all but the highest-ranking Confederates. Not to get too heavy here. Is the PGA Tour feeling like Lincoln, or are parts of the PGA Tour feeling more like the radical Republicans who said, hey, they started it. Amnesty is too lenient. We want our pound of flesh.
Yeah, and that's been part of the holdup over the past couple of years, even since the June 6, 2023 framework agreement. I think most tour players were actually okay with their counterparts leaving to LIV. What really upset them was then those LIV players turning around and suing the PGA Tour for antitrust. And their idea was, well, hey, if you guys are going to take this 40, 50, $100 million, that's fine. But why are you now trying to ruin our livelihood? Now, it wasn't all LIV players. There's only 11 guys, but eventually the league got involved. And that was part of the June 6 agreement that kind of ended the litigation on both sides. But players have not forgot that. So to them, they're looking at this as, hey, does everyone just get to come back? What about the guys that try to sue us? Is there a special punishment for them? Talking to tour officials, I do think the leadership is really pushing for just forgiveness, because they're looking at this as, what is unification if these guys come back, or these guys are back, but they're not back, right? They want Bryson, who was one of the 11 to sue. They want him. They think of him as a popular draw. They don't want him sitting on the sidelines. They also, I think and rightly so, there's a little bit of apathy toward all this fighting. I think fans, for the most part, were very on the tour side, strictly because of the sports washing and human rights implications. But because this infighting happened, and both sides were really guilty of kind of looking out for themselves rather than where their actions were taking the game as a whole, everyone just got worn down, was my feeling of it, both inside the game and out. And that's sort of why sports washing works, right? It just wears you down to your numb, where you don't really care about the consequences anymore. So, there's still a vocal minority who want punishment and retribution of some kind. I just don't see it happening if a deal ultimately comes to fruition between the Tour and PIF.
Joe, one thing that you just mentioned there as well, the human rights implications and the Saudi public relations offensive that was necessary when LIV started, honestly doesn't seem that necessary these days. I am kind of shocked at this. Maybe I shouldn't be, but when LIV Golf launched, the players who went at least had to submit to a tough press conference or two, where they were asked if they were comfortable taking money from this particular government that has done this laundry list of unsavory things, whether it was being asked about September 11th or Jamal Khashoggi or the rights of women or gay people in the country. Phil Mickelson stepped in it numerous times in this regard. But that doesn't really seem like it's happening anymore. Like Rory McIlroy, who was one of the few active players to make that case himself, seems to be totally fine with that element of LIV at this point, or at least he's given up. And on the other hand, the ongoing, I would call it a bribery effort to put events at Trump's courses over the last few years seems like that should be smelling like roses too, because he's back in the White House. These aren't things that point toward leverage for LIV getting lesser. They point towards leverage for LIV being stronger, them being in a stronger bargaining position. What do you make of that dissonance that it seems like LIV's position is weakened, even as people have stopped making the moral argument that they made against it at first, and a business partner of theirs is the most powerful person in the world?
Yeah, I think you're right on there. And because, we've talked about earlier what the tour feels like they have leverage. This is the leverage that PIF believes they have, because the part we haven't really talked about is the Strategic Sports Group, which is this private equity group that the tour brought in that kind of helped support their coffers. This is a group, it involves author Blank, the Fenway Group, Steve Cohen. These guys want the Saudi PIF investment. Moreover, just because the tour players haven't bounced the LIV recently doesn't mean they won't, especially because now the tour they've tried to partner with PIF. How do you go to the players now and say, don't take this money from the very people we tried to partner with? And players are still very, very aware that, they were deputized to try to fight this battle. Meanwhile, their leaders were essentially selling them out behind their back. So even though they want this deal, most of them at this point, that they still are very aware of this betrayal. And even though PIF is under this mandate to cut costs, you can't understate PIF's formidability from a financial standpoint. This is not just a financial institution; it's still a sovereign juggernaut, right? Which is part of why we left it to this pointed chicken. But yeah, the sports watching thing is one that comes up a lot. I think where we really miss the mark is it's in this country, at least, we look at sports watching as a way to minimize what's going on. And in that sense, right, I think LIV has been a failure, because I think a lot more sports fans, at least, know more about Saudi Arabia's human rights past now because of LIV. But I think where it's succeeded is this idea that it's facilitated this relationship with the White House and Trump. It's normalized what's going on. I mean, gosh, Alex, you've probably seen as much as I have the whataboutism that goes on anytime you talk about Saudi Arabia. It's, well, wait a minute, where do you fill your gas up?
I mean, they're definitely paying social media users to do this, obviously. Something that you detail in your book.
I think there's certain, we brought a few experts in, and there's certainly a level of artifice of some of these accounts, and some of them are really easy to spot, right? Accounts that started in 2022, right when LIV started, or accounts that had been dormant for 15 years, all of a sudden have an interest in Saudi Arabia and geopolitics. But the reason those efforts are done is because they work, right? It's only, even if it's 30% it's fake, they're still reaching an audience that feels either disenfranchised, that doesn't like media, that doesn't like the tour, that are now echoing these things. And because this echo chamber exists, these messages and these sentiments are out there. So, I think I make my feelings very well known of where I feel about Saudi Arabia on the sports watching front. But certainly over the last 4 years, they've either won people over or tired them down, or tried to show what they think is, well, if you're going to be upset about this, are you going to be upset about what America does, or what Qatar does, or what China does? And it becomes this argument people do not want to have when they're tuning into sports, right? People tune into sports to kind of tune out the real world. And now we're bringing these real world issues front and center to this sort of reserve spot. So I think that's how this has been a success, because people are sick of talking about it.
I think it's undoubtedly been a success in the normalizing, like you said. I mean, from a women's sports perspective, watching Saudi's relationship grow with the WTA, and to most recently, like, Saudi Arabia is sponsoring a maternity policy for women's tennis players and getting all this promotion for it. I don't think the deals between the WTA and the Saudis would have been able to happen if LIV hadn't kind of broken that initial barrier and sucked up a lot of that controversy and lived to tell the tale. And it's a depressing new world we're in.
Absolutely. And the one we haven't even discussed yet, who's arguably the biggest player in all this, is Saudi and LIV Golf's relationship with President Trump, right? I mean, this is a guy who, when he was in his first presidency, cultivated Saudi connections. He had a relationship with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. that partnership continued. Obviously, when Trump left office, one of the things that gained traction was his son-in-law and former senior advisor, Jared Kushner, getting a $2 billion investment from the Saudis for his equity fund. And then when LIV launched in 2022, even before they announced their roster, one of the first things that was announced was this partnership with Trump to visit his golf courses with LIV events. And you have to remember where this was at the time. When LIV launched in 2022, this was against the backdrop of basically the golf establishment turning their back on Trump. The PGA Tour had abandoned its Miami tournament at Trump Doral. The PGA America took away its PGA Championship from Bedminster that saw in the January 6th insurrection. The R&A had repeatedly declared it would not visit Trump Turnberry for its Open Championship. The idea being, as long as the attention is going to be on Trump and not the competition, we don't want to go. But the Saudis made a really smart calculation. They said this guy who's essentially ostracized right now, he still has power. He still speaks to half this country. There's still a way forward for him to get back in the presidency. And if he gets back, he's going to remember who was loyal to him when everyone else basically put him to the side. So, when we talk about sports washing, being able to partner with this guy and now a business partner is in the White House. It's sports washing to a T.
Whenever there's a schism of this sort, whether in sports or in geopolitics, or in this case, both, the reunified entry is never exactly the same as the entity that existed before that schism. So I wonder how you think golf could be forever altered by this. Even years down the road, I assume that we won't look back and say, oh, remember when there was LIV and there was the PGA Tour? That was just a little blip, just a little fun time we all had. There will be some sort of ripples and reverberations from that, even after this is settled. And I guess it depends on the terms and the timing, but I wonder how you think we will look back years later and be able to trace certain things to this whole saga.
Yeah, a little bit of that's predicated on the outcomes, right? And to me, at this point, there's essentially three end games. One is this comes together. We have a unified tour, and what that looks like, that's changed going forward. We would obviously have a very heavy Saudi presence in this American institution, which I honestly think would then facilitate other Saudi investment in other professional sports. This SSG group, which went with Cohen and Blank and the Fenway, they own other sports franchises. And all of a sudden I can definitely see, hey, if Saudi money is in the PGA Tour, what's it keeping from being in Major League Baseball, from the NFL? Obviously, the NFL passed that private equity amendment last year where 10% can now be funneled to franchises. I think the NBA is interested. So I think this could be the first stepping stone of Saudi really getting into American sports in a big way. I think that would be the biggest change from if this deal happens. If it doesn't, I think you're still going to see this schism continue, because even though LIV is hemorrhaging money, Saudis are not a group that are used to losing, right? Thing I always go back to is MBS is not even a golfer. He's a big video game guy, which actually I think should scare people, because the reason he likes video games is he has this world where anything can happen. And that's his worldview. So while a lot of other people would go, there's no way he's going to continue to fund this. If it's a matter of hubris and they have the capital, I think this thing's going to continue on. And as long as it continues, we're going to keep having this idea of this two-tiered system, and the best players in the world are only get together 4 times a year at the major championships. The third end game, this is the one I feel like it's been underreported, and this should actually scare the tour to making a deal, is there's the European Tour, the DP World Tour. They are technically partners with the PGA Tour under this separate strategic alliance that was made a couple of years back. It's also been no secret that a lot of European players feel like they've been made second-class citizens in this deal. We've definitely heard rumblings that if this tour deal falls apart, Saudi could go back to Europe. The Europeans go, wait a minute, do you guys want this money? Because even before this PGA Tour deal happened, DP World Tour is what brought the Saudis into the golf world in the first place in 2019 with the Saudi International. They're the ones that essentially brought, that made them whole into this sport. So a lot of European players are also wondering, why did we skip past this money in the first place, especially now it's going to our American rivals, for lack of a better word. I can see this now becoming, and as bad as the schism is now, a DP World Tour that's funded by Saudi could really bring this to the next level. So I think that's where the 3 end games are. How this actually affect down the road of the sport for the landscape. Golf is actually more popular than it's ever been, at least at the amateur level. It was the upshot of COVID. It was one of the few things you could do safely outside. So it's been very weird to see the amateur interest rise, but the professional interest has started to drop. TV ratings have been going down for the past couple of years. They've started to go a little up over the past couple of months, whether that's because of bad weather across the states and people are staying in, or it's a true rise. We'll see here in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, I think people are really looking at this sport as so much greed. They really care about us, and that is the collateral damage I think people in golf are going to have to be dealing with for some time.
Joel Beall, thank you so much for joining us here on Hang Up and Listen. The book, Playing Dirty, comes out in June. Like I said, we will link it in our show notes. I've already read it, really enjoyed it. That's why I wanted to have you on the program today. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Up next, star power rules the day in the NCAA tournaments, which still are not giving us a lot of madness. As we progress through the season, every fan knows that big wins are hard to come by and tough losses are even harder to accept. But do you know what isn't hard to accept? Discover. Believe it or not, Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. You heard that right. 99%. So make a good call for your wallet and get Discover. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report. Learn more at discover.com/creditcard. Hiring shouldn't be a hassle or a drain on your budget. And Upwork is your one-stop shop to find, hire, and pay top freelance talent, saving you time and keeping costs in check. Companies at every stage turn to Upwork to get things done and find more flexibility in the way they staff key projects and initiatives. Upwork's global marketplace is filled with top talent in IT, web dev, AI, design, admin support, marketing, and a lot more. Posting a job on Upwork is easy. With no cost to join, you can register, browse freelancer profiles, get help drafting a job post, or even book a consultation. From there, you can connect with freelancers and easily hire them. Upwork makes the entire process simpler and more affordable with industry-low fees. Post a job today and hire tomorrow with Upwork. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That is Upwork.com to post your job for free and connect with top talent ready to help your business grow. That's UPWORK.com. Upwork.com. What's that, Ben and Lindsay? Is that chalk? Yes, it is. Since we talked about the lack of upsets in the NCAA basketball tournaments last week, there has only been more chalk. The men's Final Four is going to be comprised for just the second time ever of only the 4 number 1 seeds, Auburn, Duke, Florida, and Houston. The women's Final Four isn't set yet, but is sure on track as we record this on Monday morning. 2 1 seeds in and a pair of 1 versus 2 games to decide the remaining spots. We talked last week about the theories for why this tournament season has gone this way, and we tended to agree that it's a bit early to say for sure that it all comes down to the transfer portal and name, image, and likeness payments. But Lindsay, it sure does feel like this has been the tournament of the superstar. Cooper Flagg on the men's side, just outrageous for Duke. Janai Broome, same deal for Auburn. Paige Beckers just had a legacy performance, one of the great games in the illustrious history of UConn women's basketball to take that program to the Elite Eight. Really the lone exception to it's all been about the stars in terms of the biggest stories has sort of also been about a star, and that's Juju Watkins getting injured for USC early in the tournament, and then that program, as we record this, still being on a run without her. So I guess it's simple. Recruit one of the 2 or 3 or 4 best players in college basketball and let them cook.
Yeah, simple, right? Why doesn't everybody just do that? No, look, I have not even begun to emotionally process Juju Watkins' injury, and having her go down in the second round of this NCAA tournament when USC was looking so good, when the matchups were just so enticing. It's a devastating moment, and I just want to hold space for that. It's not the end, though, of women's basketball, of Juju Watkins, of USC. It's not the end of anything. It's an interruption in some storylines. But, I think you're right. I mean, we've got number 1 seeds galore. The men have all 4 number 1 seeds. The women have a chance to have all 4 number 1 seeds still alive. We'll see Texas and TCU face off, and then we'll also see Southern Cal and UConn face off on Monday evening. And if USC and Texas both advance, we'd have all number 1s. But I think what you're seeing is just not just the rise of individuals, but the rise of the reach, the social media reach, the brand. You're now seeing these individual players become as big of brands, if not even bigger in some cases, than the schools themselves. And so when I look at each school, each coach that we still have left in this tournament, I just see these huge entities, but not in a way I used to, I don't think as much about the history of the individual schools. I think more about the coaches. I think more about the players. And I think more about individuality, I think, than ever before, which is really an interesting way to frame a team sport, and especially to frame an event that is known for kind of chaos and one-off storylines.
Yeah, and, we talked last time about how, okay, maybe the virtue of this will be that all the remaining teams will be great, and thus we will get incredibly closely contested and exciting games. And maybe we still will, but we're here sounding like a broken record forecasting that could happen, because it hasn't really. I mean, in individual cases it has, but the average margin of victory in the Sweet 16 and Elite 8, on the men's side at least, was 10.9 points per game, which was better than the 14.3 in the first 2 rounds, but still worse than the average previously in all of the since 1985 64-team tournament era by about a point. So we're still getting sort of lopsided matchups in addition to the lack of upsets. So it's sort of worst of both worlds, I guess, to this point, which is kind of counterintuitive because, of course, we're left with the best of all worlds when it comes to the actual talent of the teams here. So that is the good news, I guess, that the Final Four on the men's side and potentially on the women's side could be the strongest we've ever seen, statistically speaking. And so that's something to look forward to, even as we're lamenting the lack of Cinderella teams here. And Lindsay, we talked before the tournament started about just how much of the gains in viewership and attendance we were going to see the women's side of the tournament keep post Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese. I know there have been some slight declines, 20 to 30% from just that extreme high watermark of last year. But even with that decline, it is still well above where it was historically. So I guess it's kind of a regression from the peak, from sort of the generational superstar who got everyone into things. But then that really raised the floor and the baseline to what is still a pretty high point, which is why it stinks that those people will not be seeing Juju Watkins now, but there are still some stars alive here. So I wonder what you've made of the enthusiasm, especially on the women's side thus far, and just how that jibes with our pre-tournament discussion of what things would look like.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways it's gone the way I'd hoped and wanted it to go. Do I wish things have been, there have been a few more moments of chaos, maybe? Absolutely. And Juju not being there will definitely hurt. I mean, she's the name, but you still got Paige Beckers. You've still got Haley Van Lith. You got Dawn Staley in the South Carolina juggernaut. You've got Lauren Betts in UCLA, who have made it to their first Final Four. In program history, NCAA Final Four, we should say. They did win the AIAW championship, which you might hear a little bit more about later in the show. I don't know. Stay tuned. But I think that one of the I saw a graphic that if you look at like the top 5 most followed on Instagram stars left in March Madness, 4 out of the 5 of them are women. They're, Juju, Flau'jae Johnson, who is now not in the tournament anymore. LSU just lost in the Elite 8. But you've also got Haley Van Lith and Paige Beckers, and who both are still alive with the possibility to make it to the Final Four. And I also remember being at March Madness and being at Women's Final Four in, I believe it was 2022 in Minneapolis. And who was there? Haley Van Lith with Louisville and Paige Beckers with UConn, right? So what I also think the women's game gives that the men's don't, this is not a hot take or a fresh observation, but I think it's more clear right now than it ever has been with these storylines we have, is you really get to know these players on the collegiate level. You follow them day in and day out for years. And there's an emotional investment that comes with that. There's an excitement that comes with that I think even appeals to the casual sports fan who maybe used to have that with men's basketball, but really that's getting rarer and rarer.
It's kind of a funny thing about the difference between the men's and women's game in this, where I wonder, like, when the WNBA is at a certain point in its growth, if to some extent that might change, right? Like, if after you've had a great year or two, you just go. The NBA is obviously at that point, and that means that we're not going to get to know Cooper Flagg as a college basketball player. Most people who watch Cooper Flagg play college basketball will have watched him for like 3 weeks, because that's when most people watch college basketball. And I like that we have kind of both of these things going on right now, where you've got Paige Beckers capping off this really long, really, in a way, storybook. I mean, we'll see how the ending is, but she's been
Certainly
there for
storied.
half a decade at this point. Storied. She's gone through half a decade there at this point. She's had to come back from a significant injury, and she's done it successfully, and she's going to be the top pick in the WNBA, I think. Check me if I'm wrong on that. And then in the other tournament, you got Cooper Flagg, who is just in college basketball for the blink of an eye, and yet in the same way that Paige has been the sun, the moon, and the stars, has been everything that was promised. He's been the best player in the country, not particularly close, met every expectation, gonna go to the NBA and be the first pick and probably be the rookie of the year in the NBA. Getting ahead of myself. I like that these two tournaments have these different flavors of college basketball legend. One who's done it for 5 years or 4 out of 5 years, and one who's going to, write his entire story in the span of about 3 weeks.
I do too. And I especially like that you just get to see, I like it just how many different journeys you get to kind of follow. The transfer portal is the topic du jour, of course, and certainly helps a lot of teams retool. And in the women's game right now, you have teams like, LSU and, of course, most significantly, TCU, Texas Christian University, who is in the Elite Eight and will face Texas tonight. But what you're seeing is, like, that's a team that was built entirely from the transfer portal, basically. And you have a star like Haley Van Lith, who has gone from Louisville, where I mentioned she was early in her career, making it to Final Fours. Then she tried things at LSU, and then she gave it one more shot at TCU, and we've seen her really we've seen the best of her. So you see that college basketball gives you a chance for stories like that, and yet it always also gives you a chance for stories like what we're seeing from Lauren Betts at UCLA, what you're seeing from Paige Beckers at UConn, where you stick with a program, and you give it time and you stay committed and you see where that ends up taking you. Same with like Madison Booker and Rory Harmon over at Texas. So I don't know. There's a lot of hot takes and there's a lot of bio-baiting over, which way is right, which way is the most pure way to do it, which way it was done when I was a kid. But I like that there's not one specific way to build a team, to build a program anymore. I would say my hottest take is that it's so much about the coach. It's just so much on both sides.
And looking ahead, Duke just seems unbeatable right now after shutting down a great offense in Alabama, because we knew that Duke could score, but that they can shut down scorers just as well makes them seem pretty impervious. But they're favored, not that heavily favored, because all of these teams, again, are really good and the gap is really narrow. And so I've been thinking philosophically, what does this say about what we want from playoffs? Because there's just such a heavy postseason emphasis across all sports these days. There's just been a recalibration of fandom where we care more about the playoffs than we do about the regular season typically. Now, that's probably always been the case with college basketball and March Madness, so maybe that was leading the way. But we have this year, second ever time that you have all 4 number 1 seeds advance on the men's bracket, and then potentially the first ever time they do on both brackets. The upset rate on the men's side, 18.3% in terms of the lower seeds topping the higher seeds, is the lowest in any tournament. Again, going back to 1985, heading into the Final Four. And most people seem to be disappointed by that on the whole. Now, if we get some classics in the Final Four, maybe that makes up for it. Maybe the ratings that I was talking about earlier are juiced by the fact that these are great teams and superstars remaining here at the end. But I just wonder what it says that it is kind of disappointing to this point, because on the one hand, we don't want playoffs to be so random that it makes the regular season seem meaningless. People get upset about that, certainly in baseball, when they're just upsets left and right and too many underdogs toppling the heavy favorites. On the other hand, we don't want the playoffs to be so chalky that we might as well not have had a tournament, because we knew who the best teams were when the tournament started, and then they're the same teams at the end. So I was once nicknamed Mr. Chalk by my former colleague at The Ringer, Michael Bauman, because of my tendency to make very safe predictions, which is due to my lack of confidence in my soothsaying. And yet, even I, Mr. Chalk, am not fully satisfied by this. And I guess it's because in this tournament specifically, we want madness. It's right there in the name. And whatever else this is, it is not madness.
We, the collective sports watching public, will find a way to bitch about anything. And
yes, that's the takeaway.
Yeah,
that's why we need sports podcasts.
That's all there is. That's why we stay in business. I'm cool with being upset that there haven't been very many close games. Like, that's cool. It's an entertainment product. We're all consumers. That's fine. Can complain about that the same way that I was annoyed with the way that the Severance finale ended in season 2. But
I liked it.
It was great TV. I was just annoyed.
Okay.
I thought it was well written by the Severance script.
You can read our separate recaps at The Ringer and Slate.
True. I don't know what the exact amount of upsets that people want is. I'm guessing that most people would be happy if they could get 2 or 3 Cinderellas who bow out in the Sweet 16 to the Elite 8 and a few more close games. I'm guessing that would mitigate the pissing and moaning about it. But I suspect we would find a way to complain about something else, because that's in our nature.
Even when we have no upsets, we have people being upset.
Unbelievable.
And like, one of the best games, if I can have an old man complaint here, one of the best games that was, Arkansas, Texas Tech, overtime, Sweet 16, just wild. It ended at like 1 a.m. It was so late at night. I was at a conference and I get back to my hotel room at midnight, and there are 2 men's basketball games still going on like a Thursday night. And they just kept going. It was wild. The basketball starts too late as well. And it's not enjoyable when it's that late.
Next up, the Great Chase in hockey is getting very, very close. We'll talk about it.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Hiring shouldn't be a hassle or a drain on your budget. And Upwork is your one-stop shop to find, hire, and pay top freelance talent, saving you time and keeping costs in check. Companies at every stage turn to Upwork to get things done and find more flexibility in the way they staff key projects and initiatives. Upwork's global marketplace is filled with top talent in IT, web dev, AI, design, admin support, marketing, and a lot more. Posting a job on Upwork is easy. With no cost to join, you can register, browse freelancer profiles, get help drafting a job post, or even book a consultation. From there, you can connect with freelancers and easily hire them. Upwork makes the entire process simpler and more affordable with industry-low fees. Post a job today and hire tomorrow with Upwork. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That is Upwork.com to post your job for free and connect with top talent ready to help your business grow. That's UPWORK.com. Upwork.com. Alex Ovechkin really might do it in these next few weeks or even these next few days. The captain of the Washington Capitals scored his 890th goal on Sunday, leaving him 4 shy of tying and 5 shy of surpassing Wayne Gretzky for the most in the history of the NHL. It's a record that most people thought was never going to be broken. On Hang Up, when there's a big news event in the offing, we have to decide whether we would like to cover it preemptively to frame up the context a bit, or join the rush of people podcasting about it after it happens and try to put our own spin on it then. Here it was a tough call, because the Capitals have 9 games left before their playoff run begins. They're on a bit of a skid, but they're going to be a high seed in the Eastern Conference. They play 4 times in the next week before Hang Up and Listen is set to record again, so it really could happen any time if Alex Ovechkin can sprinkle in maybe a multi-goal game here or there. Ben, we checked in on this story a few months back and talked about how it didn't feel that Ovechkin's chase had really broken through into non-hockey consciousnesses as he was starting to get a little bit closer. Do you think it has now?
I think it's getting there. I think it'll be limited somewhat by hockey's mainstream reach, even post-Four Nations, and just by Ovechkin and Putin, etc. But it's definitely inescapable now if you look at sports headlines, and it's about to be even more so. And I do think he's going to get it. It is certainly not a lock. Our friend Neil Payne over at Neil's Substack, he's been operating an OV tracker where he simulates various outcomes. He now gives him a 73.5% chance to tie the record and a 55.5% chance to break it by season's end. So not much better than a coin flip. I would take the over on that. I just feel like he's going to get it, and maybe it's just because he has been increasing the pace lately. And again, it is hard to know how to talk about a long-term chase like this, or when to, as you said. It's kind of like the Austin Powers steamroller scene. It's like, it's coming, and then all of a sudden it's there. Or maybe it's like Lancelot running in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. You just see him running endlessly, and then all of a sudden he's right in front of your face. And that's kind of what has happened with Ovi, where you look up and, oh, he's right there, to the point where maybe we should do this segment now because he might actually break the record before we record again. And I'm just glad that he is doing it still as a productive player, not peak Ovechkin, but it is sort of sad when a player is chasing a milestone. Not sad necessarily, but not something that you can celebrate quite as wholeheartedly. When someone's just kind of hanging on to get to that number and is a shadow of their former self. And then there's the whole conversation about, is this selfish to hang on so long? And is it hurting the team? That's not really happening here. I've seen some research that suggests maybe he's playing a little bit too much, but he's obviously still good, and the Caps have the best record in the NHL, so how much could he be hurting them? So really, we just sort of sit back and wait and watch to see if and when history will be made.
Yeah, he's the best player on a team that's going to be a Stanley Cup contender.
Yeah, and that's wild to me. The fact that I think you have to give the Capitals a lot of credit for building a team around him at this point in his career to continue to compete. I think that we're used to seeing milestones like this. They often come during garbage time of people's careers, when that's kind of the only thing that is left to achieve. And I think it makes it so much more special that this is happening as the Caps. I mean, they're, in the lead. Like they've got it. I don't know if they're the favorites. I think there's still a lot of question marks, and the race feels wide open in the NHL in general. But what a gift to the sport and to the sports fans. One of the things I loved was The Athletic had a great piece on how the NHL is really worried and planning for if there's like a contentious review that comes on his record-setting goal. Like, what if he sets the record and then it's challenged and then there's this long pause and review after the celebrating has already done? And that made me think, like, that's such a modern problem to have, but it's a real thing. Like, that could definitely happen. And that would be awkward.
Yeah.
I worry even more that he will get it on an empty net goal, of which he has had several. And that's kind of come up, people questioning, oh, does this count? Does this cheapen it somehow? Gretzky was the previous record holder in empty net goals, but I afterballed previously about goalie goals and how those are up because goalies are being pulled more often. And so we have much more empty net time. They're exiting games earlier. And thus the rate of empty net goals has spiked quite considerably across the league. So it would be a bit of a bummer, a bit of a letdown if that's the way he gets it. I hope he really has to earn it.
I think that Ovechkin has done a lot of the heavy lifting this year in the actually earning it department. Ovechkin early in his career was pretty frequently the NHL's leader in power play goals. The Capitals had a lethal power play for years, as you should have when you have Ovechkin queuing up for one-timers from the left dot the way that he did for all those years. This year, he's only scored 9 power play goals. He has scored 28 at even strength. He has not, I would say, just been feasting on the man advantage. Not that there's anything particularly wrong with that. And, like you say, Ben, he's not getting stronger as his career goes on. That doesn't really happen at 39 years old. But the way that he's been able to slow the aging curve is kind of incredible. And I'm not going to say it's 100% without precedent, in part because the player that he will always be compared to, Sidney Crosby, is doing basically the same thing at a year or two younger than him this year. Amazing, the run that the two of these guys have been on. But one difference for Ovechkin is that the Capitals have, to their credit, and Lindsay, you just said it, like, given this guy the kind of team around him that has allowed him to continue to flex his greatness in a way that matters. Like, this chase is happening during a Capitals playoff chase, which is very cool.
And you can get yourself into trouble doing that sometimes when you build around a franchise icon and then that icon is getting up in years and you find, we overcommitted to what this guy used to be and now he's not that anymore. And this is actually kind of handicapping us. And maybe it's even making him look bad because we're putting him in a position to have to shoulder the load that he used to and he's no longer up to that. So the fact that Ovechkin is more or less is a blessing when it comes to this race and to his team. And it also, I think, maybe saps slightly just from the chase because the only suspense right now is he going to do it this season or are we going to have to wait until next season? I mean, you never know. Of course, there could be injuries. Anything could happen. But it's a matter of time now. It's a matter of will it be in the next couple of weeks or will we just have to wait until the following season when he will get it in one of the first games then and we'll just have waited so long that maybe the anticipation will have almost died down. It's also strange in these cases where it's a career accomplishment award and so we're all waiting for bated breath to just celebrate this one goal. But of course, the 890 plus goals that came before that are the one that made that record-breaking goal possible. So it's just, there's one more and finally we can celebrate, but we can already celebrate the career that he's had and that he has had essentially the same goal-scoring prowess as Wayne Gretzky, if not better. And I ran some of those numbers last time we talked about this, and maybe I will again at the Ringer when he finally does it. But you're right. The shape of the career has been different because Gretzky did decline as an older player, obviously from a supremely high level, whereas Ovechkin just hasn't really. And that's why maybe it sort of snuck up on people initially, just because he wasn't really on pace to do this, at least when you factored in a normal decline. And then he just never had the normal decline. He just kind of kept trucking along. And now he's on the verge of breaking this record.
He faked this out a bit. It looked last year like he might be in the normal decline. He only scored 31 goals in a full season last year. It looked like it was happening. And then, Lindsay, it just didn't happen.
Yeah. I do wonder now that, I think like we said, the madness part of March Madness is over. The tournament's not over, but it's winding down. I think this is a good kind of couple of weeks for this to be in the forefront of the sports world's attention. But I do kind of wonder how the geopolitics of it all is going to impact the coverage, the enjoyment of it, and maybe not at all. But of course, there's the Ovi's relationship with Putin, the Russianness of it all. There's Gretzky, who is going to be traveling around with him so that he can be there when this record is broken. And of course, there's his allegiance with Trump. And it's just something I'm kind of we'll just see how that plays out in the coverage. And, you know, are we going to get Stephen A. Smith talking about that? Probably. Like, it's just...
The other thing I wonder is whether this will be the last record chase of this sort that we see in a while. And you can always get yourself in trouble saying, oh, this will be the last this or that, because inevitably someone else comes along. But this is the kind of chase that you can forecast coming for years in advance. And because we have had so many great old players lately and players who had that incredible career longevity, is anyone going to catch Serena in women's tennis? Is anyone going to catch Djokovic in men's tennis? Is anyone going to catch LeBron in basketball? Is anyone going to catch Brady in football? No one's coming close to Barry Bonds on the home run leaderboard in baseball, and there may be other reasons for that. But the point is, we've had all sorts of players who are remaining really productive late into their careers and just racking up these numbers that we never thought we'd see. And so now that we saw those guys break the previous records in the past several years, at least, I wonder whether there will be a drought, whether this will be the last of its kind that we'll see, at least in some of these sports where we've seen the records change hands recently. And as we mentioned last time, this isn't really a GOAT debate with Ovechkin and Gretzky. It's just a greatest goal scorer or most prolific goal scorer debate. Everyone still acknowledges Gretzky was the best. The assists record, the points records are just uncatchable even now. But it is fun to have a record chase, and these might be in somewhat shorter supply in the near future.
Yeah, also when I was doing research on this, it hit me that I feel like this is, of course, not the first big record chase that has been gambled on a lot, but that gambling is such a mainstream part of the coverage. When I was looking up ESPN articles on it, like one of the second ones on the ESPN homepage was like 5 ways to bet on Ovi's goal chase. And I was like, this is a new world we're in a little bit. and only the beginning.
I was never really a runner. The way I see running is a gift, especially when you have stage 4 cancer. I'm Anne. I'm running the Boston Marathon, presented by Bank of America. I run for Dana-Farber Cancer Institute to give people like me a chance to thrive in life, even with cancer.
Join Bank of America in helping Anne's cause. Give if you can at BofA.com/supportAnne. What would you like the power to do? References to charitable organizations is not an endorsement by Bank of America Corporation. Copyright 2025.
Now it is time for afterballs. Earlier, we were talking about March Madness, and I mentioned that UCLA, that for the women's team, this was their first time making it to the Final Four, which is wild because they've been a solid program for so long and actually won the national championship in 1978 under head coach Bill Moore. This time it was the Association of Intercollegiate Athletics for Women that was running women's sports, because the NCAA didn't want women's sports until the AIAW had proved that women's sports had an audience. But, you know, that 1978 championship was under head coach Billy Moore, had Ann Myers, Denise Curry, Anita Ortega, just a bunch of legends on that team. Billy Moore passed away a few years ago, and Any chance to talk a little bit about Billy Moore, I will take. She won 2 national championships as a collegiate coach, actually leading Cal State Fullerton to the title in 1969, which was even pre-AIAW days. And one of her biggest achievements was she was the head coach of the U.S. national team in 1976, which led the U.S. to a silver medal at the first Olympics where women could compete in women's basketball. This is when the Soviets were a juggernaut. And she did so with absolutely no support from USA Olympic bosses and USA basketball bosses. I know, that's shocking. She told ESPN a few years ago that whatever they could do, they did on not even a shoestring budget to kind of get this Olympic team together. She and the assistant coach, Sue Gunter, would speak at Rotary clubs, give clinics, anything to even get free meals for the team, including, and for some reason this has always just stuck out to me, hawking toothbrushes. They sold toothbrushes in order to earn enough money for the U.S. women's basketball team to get to the Olympics. And so, Ben, it's afterball time. What is your price for a toothbrush?
Funny you should mention toothbrushes, because on Saturday, the New York Yankees provided the most potent product placement since influencer Ashton Hall's viral video of his morning ritual caused a spike in sales of Saratoga spring water. I think toothbrushes might have been involved in the morning ritual. The Yanks launched a franchise record 9 home runs as several of their hitters swung a new kind of bat. It's quickly come to be called the torpedo bat, but it really resembles a bowling pin, with less of a taper to it than a traditional bat and a thicker barrel that's closer to the handle. A mixture of veterans and younger Yankees used the bat: Paul Goldschmidt, Cody Bellinger, Jazz Chisholm, Austin Wells, Anthony Volpe, as the Yankees trounced the Brewers. In less than the 4 minutes that Ashton Hall's timestamp said it took for him to dive into his pool, the Yankees hit 3 homers, becoming the first team on record to homer on each of the first 3 pitches of a game, and the third to hit 9 or more in a game.
That one's driven deep to left field. There it goes! See ya! Back to back to back. 3-0 Yankees. Michael, how do you top this as a first inning? 3 pitches, 3 home runs. The Yankees on fire early. Drill deep to left field. There it goes. See ya. The Yankees' 9th home run of the day. They did it again.
Michael Kay and Paul O'Neill on the call. So it must be the bats, right? Well, the bats may have helped. They had to swing something, but the bats didn't do it alone. As Brewers manager Pat Murphy said, it ain't the wand, it's the magician. Yankee Stadium is a bandbox. The wind was blowing out, and Aaron Judge hit 3 of those 9 homers using the same boring old bat he used to club 62 in 2022 and 58 last season. Nobody brought up the bats when the Yankees scored 4 runs on opening day, or when they were using them during spring training, or even last season when some of their hitters first tried them. The bats popped off, so to speak, after Michael Kay mentioned them on Saturday's broadcast when the Yankees were up 4-3.
Now, you see the shape of Chisholm's bat. It's got a big barrel on it. Well, it's actually a little bit lower than the barrel. The Yankee front office, the analytics department, did a study on Anthony Volpe, and every single ball, it seemed like he hit on the label. He didn't hit any on the barrel. So they had bats made up where they moved a lot of the wood into the label, so the harder part of the bat is going to actually strike the ball.
That'd be a weird way to hit. Going up there expecting to get jammed and putting the meat of the bat towards the label.
The Yankees went on to win that game 20-9, then hit 4 more homers on Sunday to complete the sweep and come 1 homer short of the record for the most dingers in a 2-game span. Naturally, the bats have been the talk of baseball. A lot of hitters have said they're eager to try them. Brewers reliever Trevor McGill said, "I think it's terrible. I feel like it's something used in slow-pitch softball." However, he also said it's genius, and that while it might be Bush League, it might not be. So he has a lot of thoughts, some of them kind of contrasting. As for fans, some have suggested that they're witchcraft or cheating. It probably doesn't help the new bat's reputation that they're most associated with the sport's traditional villains, or that most people's first exposure to the concept came after a historic offensive display that made them seem super overpowered and potentially game-breaking. Here's my take. Just let hitters have this. They need all the help they can get. Don't damn the torpedoes, because we can easily dispense with the cheating accusation. Experimental bats must get approval from the MLB Rules Committee before they can be used in games, and the league has confirmed that these bats are up to code. The rulebook doesn't have much to say about bat specs beyond this. The bat shall be a smooth, round stick, not more than 2.61 inches in diameter at the thickest part, and not more than 42 inches in length. The bat shall be one piece of solid wood. Check, check, and check. The bats are largely the brainchild of Aaron Leonhardt, a.k.a. Lenny, a former Yankees analyst with a PhD in physics from MIT. Lenny now works for the Marlins, who've hit 2 home runs in 4 games, and could definitely use better bat technology to compensate for not having hitters with power. It's just about making the bat as heavy and as fat as possible in the area where you're trying to do damage on the baseball, Lenny told The Athletic, explaining that the thought process was, why don't we exchange how much wood we're putting on the tip, get your mind out of the gutter, versus how much we're putting in the sweet spot. Just try to take all that excess weight and try to put it where you're trying to hit the ball, and then in exchange, try to take the thinner diameter that used to be at the sweet spot and put that on the tip. That way, he said, you can get some gains without actually making sacrifices. It's actually incredible that no one was talking about torpedo bats before Saturday, because the Yankees aren't the only team breaking out the bowling pins, and they are hard to hide. Junior Caminero of the Rays, Adley Rutschman of the Orioles, and Davis Schneider of the Blue Jays have been using them. The Red Sox sampled them in spring training, and they've broken containment in the AL East. Other teams have tried them too, including the Cubs and Twins. Orioles hitting coach Cody Ashe, a former big leaguer, says, I think that's not something that's unique to the Yankees. I think a lot of teams are doing that around the league. They may have more players who've adopted it at a higher rate, but I think if you're around clubhouses, all 30 teams, you would see a guy or two who's adopting a bat that is fashioned maybe more specifically for their swing. I think that's probably the next progression in hitting, finding out where you hit the ball in the sweet spot and putting more mass there without changing too many things. These probably aren't just purely placebo bats. The bowling pins won't benefit everyone, and they definitely don't guarantee 9 homers a game. But for those whose swings they suit, they may marginally but measurably increase contact and exit speeds. They're mostly a means of boosting the margin for error, with the cost being even worse mishits on balls off the end of the bat that weren't hard hit to begin with. One can understand why hitters might be in the market for fat bats. The league batting average and on-base percentage fell to .243 and .312, respectively, last season, which is roughly where they were before the designated hitter. Not before the universal designated hitter, before the American League added the DH in 1973. Strikeout rates are still close to all-time highs, and the league-wide batting average on balls in play fell to a more than 30-year low last year, and that was after MLB's crackdown on defensive positioning. And yes, that's partly a product of hitters swinging for the fences instead of prioritizing contact, but they've done that in part because it's so tough to make contact even if they try. Pitchers have been throwing from the same distance since 1893. They throw a hell of a lot harder now, and they're so much bigger that they release the pitches closer to the plate, which makes them look even faster. Every year, they develop a new nasty pitch, or at least rebrand an existing nasty pitch with a trendy new name that makes it catch on. The sweeper, the death ball, the kick change. Every technological advance has favored pitchers first. Pitch tracking before batted ball or bat tracking, high-speed cameras to help pitchers refine their grips, analysis of when to pull pitchers, which pitches to throw, and where to throw them. Batters can only hope to adjust to each new way of getting them out. Better pitching machines could close the gap, but pitchers have basically become machines, and teams roll out relievers on assembly lines. The only things hitters have had over pitchers to date is that their elbow ligaments are less liable to snap. Even the ways one could cheat have historically favored the pitchers. Before it was banned, sticky stuff helped pitchers increase their spin, but bat corking probably doesn't even help hitters. Neither do those donuts hitters use in the on-deck circle to make their bats feel lighter at the plate. As Milwaukee's Christian Yelich said, if it is a technological advancement on the hitting side, it would be cool because we've kind of been playing catch up with the pitching side. It's about time baseball bats got a makeover. In the 19th century, there were bigger bats and curved bats and flat bats, but the shape of bats has barely changed in baseball's modern era. Bats are stronger now, so they don't shatter as easily, and StatCast now tracks both the bat and the position of the batter's body in the box, which makes it possible to precisely tailor bats to an individual swing. For a few years now, companies have been measuring minute differences in bat density and size to eke out extra swing and exit speed, and hitters have been using bats with axe handles or hockey puck-shaped knobs. This is just the next evolution. And it might be one that pitchers can't copy. After all, they can't legally doctor the ball, but hitters can legally alter the bat to an extent. So, defenders gained an edge by shifting their positioning on the field. Just think of this as a shift in the positioning of the bat barrel. Unless and until the new bats are banned, which they shouldn't be, I say, swing away.
Well, Ben, all that I can think about from that segment is that though the Miami Marlins have no power and did not hit the ball very far, they still took 3 out of 4 with 3 walk-offs against the Pittsburgh Pirates this weekend. But otherwise, good afterball. Enjoyed it. Agree with you. Don't ban the bats. I'm not really into baseball, so but that's
I don't think
fine.
the bats, they don't come big enough for the Pirates. You're going to need a bigger bat.
Yeah. But hey, good segment. For those of you who are baseball fans, that's cool. That's fine. That is all for this episode. We also have a special bonus show that is in the podcast feeds right now for our subscribers at Slate Plus. It is about athletes faking injuries or dramatic physical contact in different sports, trying different tactics to get them to stop. To hear that, you can subscribe to Slate Plus on Apple Podcasts by clicking Try Free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/hangupplus to get access wherever you listen. The episode is available right now, right there, and we will see you over there. Our show notes are at slate.com/hangup, and you can email us at hangup@slate.com. Don't forget to follow the show. You can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Our producer is Kevin Bendis. For Ben Lindbergh and Lindsay Gibbs, I'm Alex Kirshner. Remember Zelma Beatty, and thank you for listening.